Good morning, 4G. We're going to have a look at the Battle of the Cowshed passage today, which I gave you last week, and you should have glued into your books. And for homework, you should have identified the concrete nouns and any abstract nouns, and also underlined the verbs. So let's have a closer look at this passage. You will see that I have highlighted in yellow all the concrete nouns. There are lots of them: men, shout, yard, horses, cows, enemies, gun. There are lots of things in this passage which are concrete. You can see that there are only 5 abstract nouns, far fewer, which suggests that this passage is not about ideas or things that are figurative or conceptual, but they are about things that we can imagine that are real. So horses, cowshed, gun, very real, down-to-earth, concrete things. That's what this passage is about. And that was one of the attractive things about this novel when it was first published. It was accessible to read. It's a story about things that people can understand. Very straightforward, or so it seems. Have a quick look at the underlined parts. So these are all the verbs. This particular passage is full of verbs, which means that it's full of action. Look at all the different verbs: emerged, dashed, fired, raised, dropped dead, hurled, flew, stretched, and then at the end, chasing, gored, kicked, bitten, trampled on. It's a very action-packed little passage. The length of the sentences is an important thing to look at as well, because this is a passage which is about down-to-earth action, and the way the writer makes it seem fast-paced is to do with the sentences, the types of sentences he has chosen to use. Most of them are simple sentences or compound sentences as well. Here's a simple sentence. Snowball now gave the signal for the charge. That's one finite verb there. The next one is a simple sentence. He himself dashed straight for Jones. This sentence here is a compound sentence because there are 2 finite verbs: scored and dropped dead. The pellets scored bloody streaks along Snowball's back, and a sheep dropped dead. But these are the most complicated sentences there are. There aren't very many other complicated sentences, which means that the pace of the action feels like it's moving on really fast. So let's talk a little bit more now about the narrator. We mentioned last week this idea of a naive narrator. I'd like you to write these notes in your book now, in your exercise books, in the front of them. Anything that's highlighted in yellow, if you could open that up and get a pen out and put today's date, which is the 3rd of March 2021, and start with the heading in your book, Orwell's Narrator. So Orwell uses a third-person omniscient narrator to tell the story. Just put your pens down for a second and listen before you continue writing notes. It appears, as I've just explained, that the narrator tells the story in a very factual, honest, descriptive way, using lots of concrete language. But actually, as we discussed last week, the narrator has a limited point of view, which reflects the animal's naivety or lack of understanding of what is actually happening. So we talked about this. We talked about how the animals have less understanding of what's going on than you, the reader, does. Orwell relies on this difference between what the animals understand and what we, the reader, can conclude about the situation at the farm to make his point about the dangers of wielding power. So that's an important theme in this film, and we're going to talk about that a lot more. This difference in the levels of understanding is called irony. Irony is when we know more than the characters inside the story. Satire is another important term, and that's when there is a criticism made of an individual or a group or an idea by exaggerating faults and revealing hypocrisies. Thus, the political message of Orwell's story relies heavily on irony, which satirizes a political system, and that political system is Russian communism that Orwell was making a statement about. We can see the hypocrisy of the pigs, that they are decadent, corrupt, and immoral. We have this understanding, and this criticism that Orwell is making is all the more powerful because the reader arrives at this understanding independently without the narrator pointing it out directly. And of course, we come to understand that the pigs represent the leaders of the communist revolution and the people at the top who decided that they wanted the power, despite the fact that they were supposed to be sharing it out in this equal kind of way. All right, could you take those notes down now, those ones that are highlighted in yellow? When you've copied the notes in to your exercise book, it'll be time for you to move on and complete the online quiz of chapters 4 to 7.